right. Welcome back, Tim. How the hell are you?
Doing
Friends,
well.
family, MSPs, all the people that we've ignored for a couple of months because, life, holidays, travel, conference, companies, fun things. Hey, we're really excited to have Team Tim back here. Obviously, Tim Schnur, Jesse Miller. It's been a hot minute. Mr. Schnur, how the hell have you been? What have you been up to these days?
Doing great. As you said, busy. Yeah, you seem to be a little busier than everyone, but you always amaze me on what you get done in a day. And same thing with my friend Jesse down here. I don't know how you he's starting the new Yellowstone in upstate Minnesota, and at the same time starting a business. So I pale in comparison to you guys, but it's been good. Family and getting
How's
back
that
to
house?
school.
How's that house? Are you in like this old house mode? Where's that Bob Vila guy?
Oh, you wouldn't even recognize the house if you drove down the street. It's got a new roof. It's got a new exterior. It's got a new front porch. So it's got I got a full of, front yard full of mud. So there's so many guys walking through it, bulldozers.
Awesome.
So it's good. It's good. Jesse, what have you been up to?
Well, I had the flu last week, or 2 weeks ago. So I was getting back to normal last week, and I finally feel like this week is I feel like a normal person. I got a little bit of a frog in my throat still, but on the mend. And yeah, I feel like this has been the longest month ever. it's I don't know.
Left.
Yeah, Tim. We were just talking about this, Tim, backstage, but yeah, it just seems like this has been I did not expect it to be really busy in terms of the business. I thought we would get a little bit of a breather here, and January is not afforded that, which is good, but it's just been super busy. So that and being sick, and I was just talking with Tim about, buying cattle for this year and everything else. It's been a busy month. So I'm glad to get some sense of normalcy and feeling like we're back in a cadence here on Team Tim, and excited to talk today about risk assessments.
What is normal, right? So really love that, Jesse. Being a cow guy myself and love that fresh beef, right? Always looking forward to throwing the next steak on the barbie. So things here have been ramping up too. It's been a whirlwind of the last 3 to 4 months. So rip out the holidays because that's always, craziness. But we acquired a company. We brought in a whole new service division. We have a whole new team of people and stuff. And oh my God, like every single aspect I think of my life and our business and everything has changed in like 6 weeks. Okay, maybe a little more than 6 weeks if you take out Christmas and Thanksgiving, but it has been nutty. It has been really nutty, but it has been amazing. I know we're going to get into the risk assessment stuff here, but it actually can relate because, a lot of MSPs are looking to like get their exit, do some M&A, maybe got bought out. And a component of that is definitely conducting and dealing with risk assessments. Right? Us technical geeks, we always want to just dive into the technical controls and tell me what 1.17 means. We're going to get a little around that today, but I think we need to set the stage because obviously we haven't done our own introductions. We've been bantering here for a minute. So Jesse, take a second. Who are you? What are you? Why are you?
Oh yeah, that's right. I do something, don't I? No. Jesse Miller, founder of Power PSA Consulting and creator of the Power Grid VCSO system. What we do is teach MSPs to crack the code for deploying profitable VCSO services and growing their businesses.
Love that. And then Mr. Tim, I think I have one of these for you someplace here. Let's get you up on stage and say hello.
Scroller down there. Yeah, appreciate it. So Tim Schnur, I'm in the New York City area. I help mostly law firms, but some hedge funds as well in terms of advanced cybersecurity. And what does that mean? Data privacy, data classification, and integrating these new and interesting tools into securing their data. So that's generally what I do.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah. And then I suppose I should probably come up here and say a word or two, huh? So, hey, MSPs, fellow friends, cyber risk enthusiasts. I don't know. I was supposed to say jelly cats and other things. No, that's our friend Tara. I'm Tim Golden, founder and CEO of Compliance Scorecard, where we help your MSP have the risk conversation with your customers using our compliance scorecards. The little live demo on the bottom, if you want to check us out week after week after week, of where we can show you how to have that risk conversation with your customer. And without further ado, let's just dive right in.
Yeah, we've got a short episode, right?
So I'm going to throw a question. And the question is, Jesse, define risk assessment.
Well, 2 hours later, we'll get there. Yeah, so I think risk assessment to me can mean a lot of different things. Let's go with the scholastic version first. And that's looking at the cybersecurity posture and controls for a business and deciding the level of impact that each one of the gaps will have on their environment based on their specific technical controls. Okay. So to do one of those, yeah, it's a lot, right? But it's really just the impact of their cyber controls on the probability that an event will occur. Impact versus probability, right? The problem is that to do that extremely quantitatively, we have to get very detailed in terms of our algorithms, where the controls are applied. So a true risk assessment is probably not affordable, I would say, for 95% of small businesses. Okay.
Oh, that's interesting. I might debunk that. Continue.
Yeah. So yeah, and I want you to jump in here. So I will say that I consider a risk assessment something where we take a blend of that. So we take a gap assessment. A gap assessment is where, are you doing this? Yes or no? And then we make some educated guesses through understanding their environment and their suppliers and the way they make money and their business processes. And we create some educated guesses as to the impact of those gaps. And we can come up with a risk number that way and have it be a risk assessment that's actually affordable for businesses. So I'll let you go from there, Tim.
No, there's a clear delineation here that I want us to noodle here in a few minutes. But before we do, Mr. Schnurr, how do you define risk assessment?
You know, I'll dance around a bit, and Jesse got into it, and Brian, who is now a partner or employee or, you know, aligned with Tim Golden over there, has some great kind of posts on this, and I implore everyone to check them out. But it's, you know, it's really understanding their business at first. I think Jesse started with like this, you know, the standards and the baselines, which talk about, you know, how are you aligned to a framework like a NIST or a CIS or something like that. And I think we get caught up in that quite often. And you know, it's really about understanding the business at first. So I was hoping, you know, if we have time, we can kind of go through like a little mock exercise of a fake company out in Ohio and see kind of Jesse work his magic, and maybe Tim add some color as well. So, but yeah, no, I think it's really understanding it's risk management, as Jesse said, right? And probability, right, is about risk management. So like, the firm is worth a lot of money. It's got some enterprise value. What are the things in the firm that are risks, and what are the both probability and impact of those risks is important to kind of suss out. So, but at first, you certainly better understand the firm and where did that enterprise value come from, because that is going to be really important to understand the, you know, like, how do you protect those revenue flows going forward? So.
So do you see what we both did here? At least you both did here, was as a technologist, we jumped right into understanding what buttons to click and the why and the likelihood and the and we went right into our mindset of what we think a risk assessment is. Jesse, you made a really key and interesting distinction: a gap analysis and a risk assessment. Yes or no, and a what the hell does this all mean? And when I think of a risk assessment, I'm thinking we already did a yes, no, maybe exercise. We already did a rapid thing that said yes, no, maybe, yes, no, maybe, yes, no, maybe. And then all the things out of that, I can then tie back into business risk. I can then tie back into actual business outcomes, right? Understanding and building out. When I think of a risk assessment, it's vastly different than a quick yes, no, maybe. Now, the yes, no, maybe component, I believe 90%, 100, every business should have some baseline. Now, if they choose to go deeper and figure out where their risks are, like Jesse, you want to get all these cows and build a farm. Well, I guess my first question is, do you have land? Do you have a tractor? Do you have a water bucket? Do you have feed? Yes, no, maybe, right?
Yeah.
But the actual risk assessment is, hey, Jesse, is your grass actually good enough to eat? Is your water contaminated or not?
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm trying to bring it back, like I think a risk assessment is digging a little deeper.
Yeah. Yeah,
So Tim,
absolutely.
what's the order there? Or Jesse, you can answer that question. What's the order? Gap assessment, risk assessment, MSP, new customer, right? Or
well, yeah. I mean,
cybersecurity
I think like at a core level, I always want to understand two things before I even get into gap and risk assessments, because that's going to inform how I answer the questions when I get down to the technical nitty gritty. And Tim Golden, you exactly hit it on the head, is that it's their business and what's important to their business. So I always want to do like whatever you want to call it, a crown jewels exercise, or I call it LOB apps or critical business applications. That's where I really want to start, is talk to me about your org chart, your different departments, who's in charge of those departments, and then what are the most critical business functions or applications that you use in those departments to do your job. And so I always explain it to people like, I want to break it down to a high, like a stoplight scenario in terms of criticality, like low, medium, high. And so how do I do that when I'm explaining it to clients? Like if we're talking about this exercise that you have, Tim, is somebody that doesn't know what really any of that means. I'm going to say, okay, well, think about it this way. I want to explain to them, well, we have these things called confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So I say, think about your data. If a data in this system was compromised, meaning somebody got access to it that shouldn't, if it was available, meaning you can actually get to it or use it or not, or if it was changed or altered, what effect would that have on your business? Okay. If we're looking at a high impact, we say that this is like a catastrophic or potential extinction level event for your business, right? So that's what I want to think about, a high impact. Any of those three things are compromised, I want to think about this in a high impact system. So medium impact, we want to say, okay, it would be extremely painful. We might see downturn for 6 months to a year, but we think we could get through it. And then low is, yeah, it'd be a bump in the road. It would be bad, but we could get through it pretty quickly and we'd be back on our feet in less than a month, right? So those are the three ways I want people to start thinking about, or the customer to start thinking about the impact of their systems. And then we create a list and go through that. Now, once I have that, then I've got a really good risk framework for what's important to the business to then start doing like Tim said and going in and looking at the technical gaps and the systems in place to support and protect those business critical systems. And that then helps me determine the level of risk for each one of those.
So it sounds like you have a pretty like nuanced view of the business already, Jesse, right? Like I guess we're assuming you're tailoring, or you're a niche MSP, right? But like, do we want to kind of back up and say if you weren't, and if you were like looking at a new customer with that, you don't understand like how are they doing business, how do they plan on exiting or like monetizing the business in the future, things like that? Do you kind of ask those questions up front, or do you just generally have an idea like, I know these systems? I guess, how do you suss that out?
I think you should get into this whether you know the business or not. I mean, yes, I would advocate that you should specialize in certain verticals, and you should, as like, not to say you have to do just one, but you start off, right. You have a pod that does just one, you have a pod that does another one, and you grow that way, right? So it's going to be easier for you if you're focused on similar business types. But assuming you're not, and you're just going and talking to your current client base, I think you need to know all these things about the business at a general level before you can make any sort of risk determination. And the customer should help you with that, right?
Yeah. No, I think we've had some interesting calls here, right? With like Brad Gross, or, some of these people talking about, have you looked at their contracts? Do you know what they, are responsible to deliver? So there's Ray.
Yeah, that's right.
In terms of, go ahead, Tim.
No, I was just going to say, I know you want to kind of get into a mock assessment, right? Because that's the whole point of this, right? Of today's specific session. I just understanding as an MSP what it is that you're bringing to your customer is going to be key. Are you going to be, for example, bringing them a business impact analysis? Are you going to be having some sort of business outcome with them, right? Just walking into an existing customer or a prospect and say, I want to do an assessment. You need to be able to help them understand why it is that you're doing this, right? Start with why. And so, Tim, I think you had a little bit of a scenario that you wanted to set us up on here and kind of role play things. So who's who, what's what, what's the scenario?
So let's do this. Jesse is the cybersecurity provider, VC, so whatever capacity we want to put him in. I'll play a customer. So the sample customer is a building company in Ohio. It's family business. You're talking to the CFO, which is myself here. The CEO and the father is the owner. They do residential, commercial, municipalities. So they do some government work as well. So that's kind of
cool
out there. So,
and what's my role? Shut up and listen.
You get to you're gonna play the referee in the pine here because you're master professor over there.
You're gonna grade us. Quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can hit timeout too if you want here. I don't know if that's a good idea. I'm letting you do timeouts, but
yeah. I mean, the first thing I want to know is how does the customer, because we have to be professionals. We understand the customer is not going to know everything about cyber, but I do want to understand what the customer perceives their areas of greatest risk to their business as. So that's probably where I'd start, is say, where, cyber aside, where are the areas of greatest risk to your business? And as a construction business, I don't know, Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what I think about my business. I mean, I manage or outsource all the IT, right? So we do have a lot of accounting systems. We both do building on spec. So there is kind of like some speculative things we do. We do RFPs for government contracts to build buildings and things like that. We're all over the place, Jesse. We have systems that we have to do things in our vendor systems. We have data in our own system, and hopefully someday, I'll own the business and take it over and maybe sell it someday or something like that. But just high level, kind of like what we do. So
okay. So to me, it sounds like workforce management is probably a concern. Logistics are probably a concern in terms of lead times on materials and things like that. Cash flow. I'm guessing there's a lot of cash flow stress in the business because you're putting out a lot of money for these projects. Okay. And then reputation is probably big if you're working with government and in the construction industry. I'm guessing it's kind of a closed system, right? Like people got to know people, or it's all who you know, I would guess, partially in this type of an environment, right?
we're a huge name in Central Ohio. Yeah.
Okay. All right. What you got?
But you're right.
What
So
you
we
got, Tim?
have tons of vendors. Go ahead, Tim, you time out. Yeah.
No, so a quick question. So love, Jesse, the fact that you thought of like their business, you thought of the components, the workforce, the cash flow, the components of their business. You know, I keyed in on something because this is what I do with what Tim said was government contracts. And my first brain went to, have you even done a contract review with all of your end customers, Mr. Schnurr, and determined, are there legal and contractual requirements in those contracts with, I don't know, defense? Maybe you have a DFARS. I don't know, state, maybe you have a FAR contract. Have you even done a contract review? And do you know what's in it? And what your customers, Mr. Schnurr, are asking you to do and adhere to. Is there a right to audit? Is there a right to monitor? You know, is there a right to XYZ? Have you done that, Mr. Tim?
So there's certainly, auditing and performance, like disclosures and transparency and monitoring that happens. But Tim, in terms of the lawyers and understanding the contracts, I don't really know where we are. I don't know if we're in a good place in terms of like I said, we have all these systems and this data, but you know, I know other builders that have been breached and have run into problems. Really dig in here to get your expertise. I think this business is worth, you know, millions of dollars, and I want to protect it. So, but Tim, I don't necessarily know if we have a you know, you said FARs or DFARs or, you know, state on a state basis as well. So,
yeah. So I think obviously compliance and regulatory concerns are something that, like you said, Tim, we want to key in on, and especially technical requirements. But I'll just tell you where my head's at talking to this client. There's a couple of things I'm thinking about. I would ask them this, but I don't want to slow us up too much, and say, hey, like, if your systems are down, all these systems we just talked about, are your guys still going to be out in the field working, and can they get stuff done? They're going to be like, yeah, our guys can, you know, they're construction workers. They can be out working in the field for a day or two without a laptop, and it's not going to kill them. Right. So to me, I'm going to immediately think like, operationally, workers can be out in the field. So I'm already thinking like things like data protection is more of a concern and more of a risk for this business, because if they lose customer data or they lose government data, they're going to be in hot water, and that's a long tail, but it does have existential potential effects for their business, because they could go out of business for lack of work or fines or long-term not being able to have cash flow or things like that. So long tail impact of data loss is now I'm going to be looking at, when I look at their gap analysis, controls around data, I'm going to rate a higher impact in my stoplight fashion and say, okay, if you don't have good data controls and you're not meeting that in the gap, that's going to be rated as a high, and it's going to have higher weight in the score on your risk assessment.
Again, right back to that business impact analysis. The guys in the field can sledgehammers all day long because they don't need a laptop to do that.
Right.
But the data on the back end, the security, the payroll, the all, like, you know, heaven forbid you Tim, I think you said you had multiple accounting systems, right? So chances are you probably have shared passwords across all of them because convenience or lazy or whatever. And so heaven forbid, like, one of those accounts get compromised, you take over all the accounting systems, and now your 600 employees in your bazillion-dollar business can't get paid.
Yeah. You mentioned Mr. Construction Owner. You have all outsourced IT. Is that through an MSP or is it through a single consultant? Who's handling that for you?
It's through an MSP. That's right. Yeah. Okay. So I mean,
okay.
We and as you said, I think we can still work without the systems on a short-term basis, but all the ordering, supplies, logistics, payroll, that all is we have to get that up at some point. But and I would say that the data is incredibly, we have so many contracts and so many planning and data in terms of lots and
Tell me,
entitlements and, you know, all that stuff, like incredibly valuable to us. So
tell me about this MSP. You have outsourced IT. I think, Jesse, is this where you were heading?
Yeah, I was gonna. I mean, so just high level. I'm gonna sidebar here and step out of the scenario. The next thing I want to identify, now that I kind of have like a general, we see we did that, and what did that take? 15. It's a 30-minute discussion to kind of get a sense of like what's important and where the general risks are. Okay.
Right.
This, now you're starting to build that business profile. So to your point, Tim, I don't think you need to know. It's better if you know, but you don't need to know. You can start getting that sense. So next thing is I want to start blocking and tackling of the people I need to talk to dig in on each of these. So exactly where I was going. Can we talk to the MSP? You mentioned separate accounting systems. Who handles that? Do you handle that? Do you have you said you have a CFO? Can I talk to the CFO about that? Yeah. Can I talk to the CFO? Can I talk to your logistics or your drafting department, right? Whoever your plant, do you guys outsource your architecture work, or do you have in-house architecture work? Can I talk to that person, right? What are the different, and that's what I'm talking about, org charts. I want to know the different leaders in the company that are responsible for making the business work. And I want to talk to them with these systems in mind now. And that's where I'm going to start building out my line of business applications. And so let's stop there, and I'll let you weigh in, Tim.
No, I agree. Understanding the key stakeholders, getting the right people at the table, and having the appropriate conversations. There was an underlying thing that I was asking about the MSP, which is what I was trying to determine from Mr. Schnurr Construction is, do you even know what they're doing for you? Right.
We have, you know, very basic systems. Yeah. So I'll just say, like, we have firewall, we have, you know, we're a Microsoft shop, we have, you know, we have on the cloud. It's not like we have on-prem here. We have Microsoft, you know, we use PowerPoint, we use Excel, we use QuickBooks for accounting. We use a CRM like HubSpot for, you know, for keeping track of all the clients and whatnot, and all the contracts as well. We have it basically all in HubSpot. So, but besides that, you know, we have, you know, BYOD and you know, we're using the Microsoft suite. So
essentially, have you done any sort of, like, I'm going to dig in on the MSP side because that's our audience here in Team Tim, right? Are you on a contract with them? Do you know what's in that contract? Are they explicitly saying these are the things we're doing, and more importantly, these are the things we're not doing? Because if Jesse's going to come in as the VCSO and determine you have 7 instances of QuickBooks, all with the same username and password across 12 different companies, and all the Microsoft tenants and all the SSO that goes around that, and no, like, Jesse's going to come in as a VCSO and be like, we just identified a major area of risk. And if we heard from Mr. Schnurr Construction, oh, my IT company takes care of that.
Yeah,
that's the word that I was looking for.
Yeah, so I'll increase the narrative here. We want to get bought out, or, you know, we want to get purchased somewhere down the road, and the you know, buyers we want to have our ducks in a row. So Jesse's really here to orchestrate that.
Yeah. So, and that does change things, because it's like the reason then we do need to have a more stringent risk program and risk assessment and NIST base, even framework, because when we go to talk to potential buyers and they're doing their IT and cyber due diligence, which is a thing now, right? It didn't used to be as much 5-10 years ago, but they're going to look and say, what are the controls you have in place? How can you demonstrate that you're a secure, and we're not bringing risk into the buying process? And they might actually say, hey, you're not worth as much, because we're going to have to spend a bunch of money in terms of making sure that you're secure and that your systems are up to par and that you have, you know, proper resilience built into the organization. So that is a thing now, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, I know we're running short on time here. A couple other things I want to hit. So now I've identified who I want to talk to. you know, the CFO, maybe the operations manager, which is yourself. I want to talk to sales, and I want to talk to field operations, right? So those are probably like the four. I try to, you know, to, again, making these things cost effective is like I try to limit it at 4 roles that I'm going to talk to. And when I would talk to those 4 roles, I then want to get my list of critical applications that they use and how they use them and what they use them for, and then determine some basic things about those. So I want to get a basic function definition and statement. How are they using? Is it internet facing? Yes or no? Where does it live? Like, is it on-prem, in the cloud, both? So I want to know where the data is across different locations. Obviously, are we using unique passwords in MFA or SSO or a combination of those in terms of our identity for that? Is it properly backed up and recoverable? Are there any third-party integrations to it? And then is it product custom developed? Are we doing any custom development on any of this too? Because that's going to inform some other things that we're doing. So I think if you can answer those questions for each of the line of business applications, all of a sudden you've gotten a really good landscape of what protection looks like at a high level for the different critical business systems. Then you can go talk to the MSP or the IT people and talk about general patching. You know, now you can put on your propeller hat and go talk about patching, AV, MDR, all the things that we're doing in terms of our framework. And then because you had that list of critical business systems, like, okay, are you guys patching? Oh yeah, we're patching. Well, are you patching this, 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 and this? Oh no, well, we don't do that. Well, that's a critical business system and you're not patching it. So the answer is not yes, it's partial, and it's a high risk item because it's tied to a high business system. All of a sudden now we are creating a risk measurement for that particular control in our framework.
Right. Jesse, do you want me to onboard you as a employee? And Tim can answer that. Like, do you usually do that? Like, I like to request that, like to be a, you know, to actually go through the process.
So it depends on how deep you're going on the risk assessment, right? Like, I think that can be definitely useful. It's not something I include in my de facto, like, initial risk assessment, because that's one of those things that, and I will say, like, to me, this is a continuation. Like, we want to give the customer value at a decent price. So if I want to get my risk assessment somewhere in between $6,000 and $12,000, which is digestible for almost any business in the size you're talking about, right? That's where I need to be able to get like a quick risk view and not go too deep, but go deep enough that I can actually provide some value. So all that to say is that then past the risk assessment, we're saying, hey, there's a lot of things we didn't do. We didn't go through your employee onboarding process. There's probably risk there. We didn't go through your vendor acquisition process. There's probably risk there. We didn't dig into all your contracts. We looked at 2 or 3 and we're noticing that there's probably risk there, right? So this is where we want you to sign up for our vCISO program to continue this ongoing risk treatment. And then those are things I'm going to start doing with them as their vCISO in a continuous monitoring fashion for risk program, or for the risk program.
I don't know. I'm always curious about, do I add you on as staff? Well, you know, the question becomes like the legality of all of that around there, right? You know, just depending on, again, you mentioned government contracts, maybe there's a DFARS clause, who knows, maybe there isn't. And you know, when we would consider, some kind of fractional augmentation or vCISO kind of work, there's a component of that risk to us, right? So I always would go back to, and in this case, Mr. Schnur Construction, like, we would be happy to be named your chief risk officer or your compliance officer, but that comes with a certain level of risk on us, which means we're willing to do that and we're willing to put these safeguards in place, but it is going to cost you a hell of a lot more money.
Yeah. Oh, and that's maybe my fault. Maybe I misunderstood. Tim, were you asking? I thought you were asking, do I want to go through the onboarding process to see if there's risk within the onboarding process? Or were you? Well, that's what I thought you were asking.
No, it's really both, right? I think Tim's hitting on and if you were a full-time CISO, you would go through a full onboarding position and be put
I
on
gotcha.
staff, right?
Yeah.
So I guess this is great color here, right? Like I usually ask to go through, you do get a lot of information, like you understand the employee handbook, you understand the onboarding procedures or the lack thereof them. You get an understanding of like what systems you're being provisioned. Like they might miss these things, I think, in in questionnaires, right? Like, because you just assume everything because you're living in it, right? So I find that colorful, and then even if you're quickly offboarded, also really good color. But I think Tim's talking, being kind of fully nestled in is, I agree. And I'm curious, Tim, like in terms of like cost, is that something you can put in a contract or not? Or is it something that's inherent that really does drive the cost up to like a full-time job? So
right. And so, and by the way, this is not reflective of a compliance scorecard. I'm putting my MSP hat on, so I want the audience to know that, right? I am an MSP, and I am going to become the risk officer, the named person, the named entity on risk for Tim Schneer's construction. There's a cost to that. Not only my own insurance, not only my own stuff, not only my own reputation, there is a cost to that, right? And part of that cost is just not the financial aspect of I need to charge you more to cover my own butt, but there's a cost of, Tim, if I'm going to take this on, you need to give me the authority. You need to empower me to make these decisions with you. And you need to provide us that opportunity to be able to dictate how things are going to happen in your business. Mr. Schneer, are you willing to pay for that?
No. So I guess the question is, how do I get that from a VC? So you get that same level of, how do I empower? Because I do want to empower them, because ultimately my goal is to sell this business for $50 million. Right. And I'll do whatever the investment banker tells me to do.
Yeah, I think that is.
You need to have somebody managing your risk, whether you hire a body internally that is your FTE, or you pay more money to bring a VCSO on that's taking that risk on themselves.
Well, I will diverge a little bit here, and I don't think as a VCSO I'm ever going to say that I want to be named. There's no amount of money you can put to name me as your named ISO, right? That's somebody who's a company employee that needs to be named, and I'm happy to advise them, right? But I am not a named security officer. Like that, there's just, to me, the risk upside, the risk downside for that is far too great to ever justify me risking my business or my or litigation on that. Like, yeah, I mean, I recently had a client say, "Hey, can we list you as our security officer on our 10K?" And I said, "No." you can't, right? You can list that you have a VCSO consultant who works with you to make risk decisions, and that you have a risk program, and we can talk about all that kind of stuff, but I'm not a company employee. So,
yeah. And I've done it both ways at the MSP when I ran the MSP, right? And actually, as long as legally and contractually how you're writing those agreements and mitigating the risks around those agreements, right? This is us now talking about our own risk, right? Doing our own mock assessment, right? As long as the agreements are in place that all parties agree to, there's the legalese and components around that. Like, I was named ISSO on a bunch of different things because that's how the company structured the agreements, structured the risk, mitigated the risk to the best of our ability. But then that empowered me to go to Mr. Schneer and say, I am logging you out of every single instance of QuickBooks. I am removing I am coming in with that sledgehammer, and this is what you're doing. But that's because of how the agreements were built to give us, because if we're taking that risk, I'm bringing the hammer.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, so last 5 minutes, we tend to try to leave Team Tim with a key takeaway. The key takeaway is, take off the hat, and we're no longer in the scenario. Jesse,
not
do
the
you want me to
construction guy
start with
anymore.
you on your key takeaway, or should I start with Mr. Schnurr?
Yeah, I'm ready. I would say my last key takeaway is we didn't get a chance to talk about delivering results of the risk assessment, which I think is another important part. So I'll just give the TLDR of this, is that whatever you have for a risk score, you're going to have some sort of percentage that's going to be ambiguous for lack of to the client. You're going to be like, hey, you have 75% risk. That's bad. So that's not helpful. So you have to make your results helpful and actionable. So what I think is a good thing that you can define is levels or expected outcomes for levels of risk. So you say somebody in the 100 down to 75 percentile risk range is going to have ransomware risks and other large scale risks like that. 75 to 50, you're going to have business email compromise or data compromise risks. Back to your scenario, Tim, that could be, we want to avoid that. So you need to get below that 50 mark, right? We want to see you in the 30%. We see businesses between 50 and 25% that are, pretty well protected, but they still are not completely compliant. So if you have regulatory concerns, we're going to have to look at getting your risk even lower to make sure that you don't have regulatory fines and things, risks pop up there. So giving them levels of risk and what to expect for each level helps them kind of compartmentalize that. But then you can then refer back, I call it, cutting through the layers of the cake. Like you just showed them the cake with that particular view. And then you want to cut into the slices of it and say, okay, you're at a 50%. So it seems good, but we have this critical business system that isn't protected. So that's a layer and a risk that we need to worry about. And that gets into risk register and things like that, which we can't cover today. But long story short, my takeaway is that when you're delivering those risk assessment results, you want to make sure and try and compartmentalize that and make it relate to the client in terms of business outcomes when you do that.
Okay. Yeah. The gears are spinning. That makes sense. What about you, Mr. Schnurr, and your key takeaway?
So backing away, like big vision. What is their mission? What are they trying to do? Where does the business want to go? I think it's great, as you said, like, you're distilling it downward, as Jesse said. What are the 5 big risks, right? Like regulatory risks, or like what's going to punch a hole in that vision and that mission? And that's how I think you resonate and get them on board. And once you get them on board, like you'll get all the interviews that you want, or they're fully engaged. They're going to answer all the questions, and they're, as you said, they're aligned with what this risk assessment is and what it's going to ask for. And then once you have those 4 interviews, you can start. I just don't think you start with a framework. You start at the top and you actually move, you kind of flow into it. So, Tim.
Yeah. So, thinking about, in this case, a mock risk assessment, right? Thinking about as an MSP and determining, am I doing a rapid gap analysis to get to some yes, no, low hanging fruit to be able to converse with my customer and understand where they are, yes, no, maybe, then actually move them into the business risk conversation? I would think of it that way. I would think of, I want every one of my customers to have a yes, no, maybe as some sort of baseline that says, we're good or not good, or we're great or we're not great. Some quick yes, no, maybe kind of conversation that can then start to uncover the actual business risks, maybe against a framework, maybe against a compliance, maybe against a whatever, actually uncover and conduct a risk assessment as opposed to a gap analysis, and tie that back to business outcomes.
Love it.
Yep.
All right.
That's how you put a bow on it, folks. Pay attention.
Put a bow. I don't know. Maybe there's a clip there that I should have pulled out. I don't know. Whatever. So, all right. I don't know what the schedule is. I know that we are launching our own podcast series here under Compliance Scorecard. I'm going to do a little plug for mspthoughtleadership.com. We, Brian Blakely, our friends from Connect Secure, Ryan Seymour, Desiree, we are launching this twice a month risk to revenue conversation, starting coming up on the 13th of February. So in 2 Thursdays, every other month, we're going to walk you through a year-long series of risk to revenue. We're really excited. We'll probably even have some special Team Tim guests come on and join us from time to time as well. Sorry to plug our new thing, but it is completely educational. We are not talking about compliance scorecard, but we are talking about risk to revenue. So we're really excited about that. Team Tim is still going to be here as well, interspersed between all of that. So you'll get to see my bright, shiny face plastered all over the internet, probably way more than you would like to be able to see. Okay, everybody. Anybody parting words before I kick us all out?
Thanks for joining, everybody. It's great to be back.
See you next month.
Awesome. Thank you. And do the
subscribe now.